members of the Senate and of the House of Representatives, yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy, the United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked by naval and air forces of the Empire of Japan.
Japan, like its infamous Axis partners, struck first and declared war afterwards. Costly to our Navy was the loss of war vessels, airplanes, and equipment, but more costly to Japan was the effectiveness of its foul attack in immediately unifying America in its determination to fight and win the war thrust upon it, and to win the peace that will follow. The Japs copied their German masters in striking hard at airfields. Hickam Field, northwest of Honolulu, and the Fort Island Naval Plane Base were the first objectives of Japan's treachery. Scores of planes were bruised and battered by the Japs' aerial bombs. Many of these were demolished beyond repair.
Operation Big Switch begins to have tangible results on the home front as a naval transport bearing 407 Korean prisoners of war docks at San Francisco amid scenes of emotion. Ashore is Sergeant Harry Bory of Philadelphia, who is greeted by Generals Lewis and Glasgow. The joy of reunion dominates the whole pier as fathers, mothers, and wives embrace men, some of whom had been given up for lost. For the returning soldiers, it is the end of a long, dark night of suffering and loneliness. For the scores of relatives, it is the end of a nightmare of waiting and uncertainty. It is the answer to their prayers. Our boy is home again.
This is Pleiku, 250 miles north of Saigon, the air base that was ripped by Vietnamese communist guerrillas. 8 Americans died in the attack that brought swift retaliation by U.S. and South Vietnamese forces. From carriers and land bases, 49 jets struck back at staging areas just across the border in North.
I have asked for this radio and television time tonight for the purpose of announcing that we today have concluded an agreement to end the war and bring peace with honor in Vietnam and in Southeast Asia.
One of the things that I wanted to do, and I wanted to be an American soldier from day one. And let me give you some background. I was born in Italy because my mom and dad met in Italy while they were at medical school. And I was born right on the year that the World War II started. And my parents happened to be Jewish, and it was a very bad time to be Jewish anywhere in Europe. So we ended up hiding out in the mountains. My parents, being doctors, were able to trade their services for food and shelter and protection. The interesting part there was that most of the German troops that were there weren't all that bad, but they did have the SS stormtroopers around that were out looking for people like us to either kill us there on the spot or put us on those trains to go to a concentration camp and then get killed there. I lost all my grandparents and all the other folks in during that time. But in any case, Germans used to, they were just like regular GIs, and they gave out candy and stuff. But at the end of the war, during liberation, when the Americans came in, their candy and chocolate was a hell of a lot better. And that decided me pretty much on being an American soldier. So,
overseas, we landed in Cherbourg, France, and we got off of a U.S. cruise line, Argentina. We went down rope ladders, got into a landing craft, and landed on the beach. Not in Cherbourg, because they had already pushed, in the Normandy invasion, they were already inland. And we waited around, and eventually we joined with General Patton. He needed infantrymen. First assignment over there, I was considered a point man. That meant you went in front of the military, about 100 yards ahead of them, and they said, isn't that a dangerous job? It isn't, because they don't want the point man, they want the body of man that's behind you. I was also a rifle grenadier. I shot things off the end of my rifle, anti-personnel and anti-tank things. But you had to be sure you loaded it with a blank. If you fired a rifle, a regular military ammo into it, you could blow it up. So you had to be careful when you loaded it, that's all.
Okay, and when was the first time you actually saw combat?
Actually saw combat? I would say, let's see, we landed in August, September. And I remember in a foxhole, I was in a foxhole. We weren't allowed to sleep in the houses. We had big foxholes to sleep in them. And we weren't allowed to bother the French people. If we wanted to buy something, we could use scrip money. But the funny part about it, I got a letter from my girlfriend, not my current wife. And she said to me in the letter, boy, things are rough here in USA. Food is rationed, nylon stockings you can't get, and gasoline is rationed. I looked at that letter, I'm in a foxhole with water, and I said, I'm through with her. I didn't even answer her. That's how the conditions were. If she had seen how London was bombed, I think she would have changed her mind. Yes, Brad, thank you. I got hit around November 10th. I had reached a plateau, looked down and saw some enemy troops, and I fired at them. And then I stood up, which is a mistake. Never get shown if possible, because there was somebody on my left, I put a rifle bullet through my leg. The only good thing about that, they give you a shot of morphine, which quiets you down. It was a Colonel Piper who did something at Normandy, which is in Germany. He lined all the people up. They opened the flaps of the trucks. They had a machine gun, and they shot them all. There were about a little more than 80 soldiers. And we were told, from now on, unofficially, because it's against the Geneva Convention rules, if you take prisoners, shoot them, which is against the rule. Once in a while, a guy would pop up in front of you, and you take him back to the lieutenant, and he would say, take him to battalion headquarters. Battalion was a half-hour march away. He meant for us to take him out and shoot. We had a guy who liked it. His name was Rathouse, R-A-T-H-A-U-S. He had a weapon that, right at that, as soon as you heard it, he completed his job. That Lieutenant Pfeiffer, he was convicted at the Nuremberg trials. They gave him 10 years. There was some sort of a lack of evidence. And then he got out, went to France, and bought a house there with his wife. And later, they burnt the house down, and he was killed. So he ended up a tragedy, if you want to call it that. Yes, sir. In Germany, we rode on top of tanks. We come to a little town, and if they wanted to surrender, they would put bed sheets out the window. Now, if we walked into the town, we round them all up and put them in one big building, and we sleep in the house. We would take 3 or 4 towns a day. And of course, sleep in beds. We had the food that they had plenty of food. They weren't hungry. And unfortunately, sometimes they try to trick us. They'd hang the bed sheets out, but there were Germans in town waiting for us to go in. If we saw them and couldn't take the town right away, we moved back. We were on top of tanks, so tanks would shoot down the steeple first, so they get rid of any sniper up there. And then we go in and go from house to house and clean them up. Now, when we went, for morale purposes, General Patton always had his men join the old outfit. He felt that if you joined them, you know, you'd have better morale. I was lucky. 3 days later, my unit took the town of Redalby, which is about, oh, maybe 3 miles away. And they got surrounded by the 11th Panzer, I think, and they were wiped out completely. So if I had been there, I probably wouldn't have that story to tell you. So my advice to you is stay out of the infantry.
I was in the invasion of Normandy.
Okay.
And you saw me. I remember during the invasion days, we ran out of food. And we were eating spam and pancakes. And we noticed a tugboat there, a Navy tugboat, a seagoing tugboat, had just come in from the United States. And we asked them if they had any food to spare. And the guy said, we got some frozen chickens. And it was kind of rough that day, the water. And they were throwing us chickens because we couldn't pull alongside. And they were sliding all over the deck. And I remember when I got home, I couldn't eat chicken for a long time. In my mind, it was Christmas Eve, 1944. We settled down in the galley at night. Some guy got a bottle from home. We were going to celebrate Christmas. And next to us was an army barge, engineers. And one of the soldiers was aboard our cutter. We were going to celebrate. And it was, I think a little after 6 o'clock, sometime after 6, we got a call. There was a troop transport torpedoed 5 miles outside of Cherbourg with the USS Leopoldo. It was a foreign ship carrying American troops, and the loss was great. It was the greatest loss the Navy ever suffered. And we went out there on a rescue, and the soldier was with us, and we pulled men out of the water living and dead, and it was a horrible night. It was very cold, and we were in a convoy, and when we went back, we were coming from England, going to France, and an airplane was shot down. And the Navy destroyer was the mothership in charge of the convoy, and she notified us to go for the airplane, see if there was any survivors. And the airplane went down right off what was the town? I can't think of the name of the town. Le Havre, France. It was right off the beach. And we went down there under almost point blank fire. And all we found was one pilot alive. We pulled him aboard and got out of that fast because the Germans were shooting at us. And I remember coming back on a Liberty ship. And when we got to New York, you see the Statue of Liberty, and just brought tears to your eyes. And horns were blowing, whistles were blowing, people were cheering in the night.
got hit with this torpedo. It jammed the rudder up into the side of the ship, and we knocked out our 2 starboard screws. And all we could do was go around in circles.
Oh.
All we could use was the 2 port screws. They tried to reverse one and use the other one, but me and the rudder were jammed up at such an angle, we couldn't go around in a circle. And somebody got a brilliant idea of putting sails in front of the prop planes. Now, how the heck that ever worked to get sails in front of those prop planes and have the planes use their propellers to make it work? They got us enough out of, I think with the out of the truck, where we got far enough out where somebody could tow us into Pearl Harbor.
Oh, wow.
I have some letters here that I wrote to my parents when I was in the Philippine area. And I thought I'd like to share some of them with you. Of course, they were all censored. And every once in a while, my folks would get a letter with half of it cut out. Well, anyway, that's the way it was. All right, this was 1st of April, 1945. Dear Mother and Dad, received your 2 letters last Thursday evening, written on the 18th and 24th of March. Well, this is one Easter I'll never forget, especially since it was spent at sea. This morning, the sunrise was exceptionally beautiful, and it certainly reminded me of the Easter sunrises I could see in Wilmington television. After chow, I wandered around the deck, waiting for GQ. If it finally came, we were secured at 9:30. So then I did some work in the office, waiting for the church service to start. It was held in the mess hall. Picked up this pilot 2 days in a row off the aircraft carrier. The second day when we picked him up, he was shaking so much, he took his watch off and gave it to our executive officer. But they forced him to fly so that he won't lose their nerve. When he was practicing coming into land on the deck of the carrier, he missed it and he just went right on into the water. But the sad part was, he was in a TBF, a torpedo dive bomber. And there's a gunner's mate and a radio went in the rear of that plane. And there were 4 guys drowned. You suggested the discipline that you're exposed to, I think, is good training for all young people. And also the encounters of just being with different individuals makes you, I think, a better person. I appreciate this opportunity of being interviewed, and I thank you again for the privilege of asking me to have this experience. Thank you.
Which wars did you serve in?
Well, at the very end of World War II.
All right, thanks. Where did you get? Now, what was your job or assignment on the troop transport?
I was, first of all, you come on to learn the job, and they call that the striker. Mm-hmm. So I was a striker for Water King and boat engineer. One time, when we first went into Japan, we went into the outer harbor at, what was it now? Oh, heck. Hiroshima. And from where we were laying, you could see the hills on either side all blackened where they had dropped the atomic bomb. And so we laid out there, and all of the first class and second class and better were allowed to go on the beach for about 2 or 3 hours. So they dropped the boats, and of course I'm a boat engineer, and I had a gasoline engine in this one. So I took them, got in there and started going. We went ashore. Of course, I had to get out of the boat because they were allowed on shore for 2 or 3 hours. And one of the officers that was with us decided that he wanted to go out to a ship that was laying out in the harbor. So we turned around and went back out to him, towards the ship rather. And we were busy watching this cruiser come up. No one's paying attention left or right. All of a sudden, we hear this roar, and turned around, and here was a seaplane, plane from the ship, taking off. Everybody dove over or hit the deck. Half the people in the boat went over the side. We all got sprayed as the pontoon was just about cleared. Everybody's head that was standing up or stupid enough to stand up. Got them all back on and took them back to the cruiser and hung around there for a while and went back.
How did your service and experiences affect your life?
That's a good question. It made me take things a lot seriously. It made me pay attention to the important things. It made me understand that life is short, no matter how long you live. And you should accomplish something.
Is there anything you'd like to add that we haven't covered?
No, I'm glad to tell this. I haven't told this to my kids. I haven't told this to anybody. So I'm glad that we're doing this. I was not in any combat. There's nothing glamorous about what I did. I served in the way that they felt was best for me to serve. And I'm just happy to tell. Thank you.
The orders came through that we were going to be the first troops of NATO, and that would mean being sent to Germany. At that time, General Eisenhower became the Commander-in-Chief of the European theater. After World War II, he took it again as the director of NATO. And that's where I stayed for the next 3 years, two and a half, 3 years in Germany. I got to the rank of corporal, and later on, toward the end of my time, I became sergeant. But my hearing was starting to go because they had put me in a tank company. And when those 90mm cannons went off, that was the end of my hearing. These fellows had to go out. As long as the Russians were out there on the other side of the zone, we had to be out there too. But not as much as the artillery. They were out there every week for days. You could hear them on the walkie-talkie, talking Russian, of course, but in a no man's zone. It was more like a buffer zone, a place called Grafenberg. And it sat between the American sector and the Russian sector. At that time, Germany was split into 3 parts. It was the German, French, British, and American, and the Russian, who held Berlin. But we did have representatives in Berlin. So it was a 4-country headquarters. At the time they started to build their famous Berlin Wall, and they didn't care where that wall went, and they even bisected graveyards, even between stones, gravestones.
We left there on the General Buckner ship, if I can remember correctly, and we went to sailed to Japan, Tokyo, something like 9.5 days. We got to Tokyo, and then I really woke up, and I think most of us did. When we got to Camp Drake, you start to see all the boys your age, the men your age, no legs, no feet, all wounded, and you think you said, I'm getting a little worried now. And then from there, we went to Korea. We got on a boat. We sailed from Tokyo to Incheon. Yeah, it was like something I never dreamed of in my whole life. The poorest country that I had ever seen. I've never been out of America, and I just thank God that I was born in America. And these people had nothing. They had nothing. I just can't imagine. Where I was stationed at for like 3 months in a row, you just didn't see people. Only the friends you were with. There was no civilians around. I mean, you were up in no man's land. There was nobody around, no men, no women, no children. They were all in the back there. Everybody had moved back from the little villages. Nobody wanted to be up there. There was no way to make a living. The rice paddies were bombed out. It was just, there was nothing there. Nothing there. In fact, even the animals that were alive, I seen a lion one time. My God, I thought he was a dog. That's how thin he was. And there was no dogs or cats. They just, you know what happened to them.
I got to Korea in April of '54. I served 4 months with the 2nd Division, 2nd Engineer Battalion. And all we did was train and try to keep ourselves alive, able to do our job because of the hellish weather over there. And during that part of the year was one heavy rain right after another. And we were constantly, as an engineer battalion, we were constantly working to keep the main supply routes open, and the bridges open, and so that the division could function. And then they decided to pull the 2nd Division out. Anybody else that was assigned there a relatively short time was transferred to another unit, and I went to the Korean Military Advisory Group. So it was kind of an odd choice for send a second lieutenant to an outfit that needed people with a lot of experience to advise the Korean Army. But my side of it was a terrific assignment because I got involved in everything from being an aide to our senior advisor, who was a brigadier general. I was his aide for a while. And I got to meet everybody from President Syngman-rhee to the commanders of the 1st Rocket Field Army, our Corps commander, General Che, the big guy. That's a big thing I remember about him. We trained the 5th Rock Corps to take over from 9th U.S. Corps. And at the activation ceremony, the 8th Army commander came up and he gave a beautiful address. I didn't understand a word because he spoke the whole thing in Korean, fluent Korean. That was General Max Taylor. And he later became Chief of Staff of the Army under John Kennedy. Anyway, like I said, it was a very rewarding year. Actually, 13 months I spent with KMAG. And I got all over Korea and the assignments. Every time they needed an assignment for a lieutenant, I was the only one available.
I guess one thing that stood out in my mind is a shame that I didn't have slides the first year I was overseas. I only had a 35mm camera. And I happened to be on a tour in Rome
when the Pope died in '58. I don't know. His name was Pius, but I don't know which one. And that was a procession that was out of this world. The carrier shutting off our fuel lines without telling us that they were full. Hose broke. We're always heading into the wind for steering. And it had to be a forward line, and everything just blew back. Whole ship, man, everything was black with fuel oil. Some of these ships would lose steering, and they would just start veering off. And it was every man for himself. Get away from the cables, because they get a split and wind and cut you up real bad.
I went to what they call advanced infantry training, and afterwards, I found out I was being assigned to Germany.
I see. What cities did you serve in Germany?
I went mainly. I went by boat to Hamburg. No, not Hamburg. Let me correct that. To Bremerhaven, and then took the train to Mannheim, where I caught a bus to Worms. The Army had everything set up, the whole group of us going. And in Worms, that's where I was there for about 13 months before we were told we were going to Baumholder. And in Baumholder, I finished my tour. I left Baumholder April 1967. I was a rifleman. I was what they call the mechanized infantry. Wherever the infantry went, we would go by what they call track, and then we'd get out and take our positions, you know, where you were assigned, and stand by ready to go into action.
Did you see combat?
I went to Vietnam in 1968. I had volunteered for Vietnam on several occasions, and they sent me to Korea instead. But I finally went over there in '68. I'd been to Vietnam. It was hot. I checked into the squadron, and they just told me to. They assigned me to a section. I, drew weapons and field gear and that type of thing. That's basically. I think it was interesting was for an Air Force guy serving on the ground. Most of the time was spent with the Army out in the field, because we were moving Army units all over Vietnam, basically. And my people were, they were rigging for airdrop and also going out to the field and physically moving Army units and cargo. By that, what they did, they had an aircraft portable forklift, which is what they called it an adverse terrain forklift that you can put on an airplane. And that thing just worked wonders. We lost 3 of them, I think. We got hit by rockets and mortars and that type of thing during attacks, and I have pictures of them. As a matter of fact, on our unit website, there's a picture there of a blown up forklift, which is pretty impressive if you weren't on it at the time. We have my troops were pretty well exposed to enemy fire quite often, and I did lose one individual. Was killed. A bunch of the other guys were wounded. I was lucky and came out without a scratch.
And I asked to be put on a levy for Vietnam. I volunteered for it.
And I got orders that were going to send me to the 5th Special Forces Group in Vietnam. And when I got into Benoit, at just outside of Saigon, it's the Air Force base there, some young NCO came up to me and said, "Sorry, Dai Huy," it's Vietnamese for captain, but we're going to have to divert you up to the Americal Division. There's a critical shortage of company grade officers. And I'm thinking, oh, I wonder why, you know? So I end up going up to the Americal Division. I check in with the G1 up there. He sits there and he says, "We're going to give you an artillery battery." And I looked at him and I said, "Well, can you give me something else? Because the last time I looked at an artillery tube was in Officer Candidate School. For the last three years I've been Special Forces." They said, "Okay, we'll give you a rifle company." That's something like, you know, SF something like infantry. I said, "Fine." So they sent me to the 4th Battalion of the 3rd Infantry, and I ended up commanding Alpha Company. And I was there from June of 68 to June of 69, and I managed to make it through. Let me back up a little bit. My first day in the field, I was terrified. I was terrified that I'd screw up and I'd get somebody killed, you know, from a stupid mistake. And somehow or other, I lucked out and I managed to make it through my whole time as company commander without getting anybody killed.
I guess the most memorable was my first night with my squadron. About 2 a.m. in the morning on August 19th, I had 2 122 rockets land as close as me to you. And the hole ended up from the blast was only about 6 inches from my feet. I lost a significant amount of hearing that day. Well, that day it actually killed 4 men, those rockets. They had landed just outside the wall from where I was on a generator. They were trying to start the generator. 2 of them lived about 8 hours. There was 1 corpsman and 3 Marines. And when I got ready to go to my reunion in 1990, I found out that I had been working with the brother of one of those Marines. And after talking to him, knew which one of them he was, even though that was my very first day. And my very first day of flying medevacs, we flew into an area called Ashaw Valley, which everybody said was one of the most feared areas in the I Corps area. And we went into that same zone 3 times that day under heavy fire and picked up 19 wounded each time.
We're near Da Nang. We had gone up to relieve the 1st Cav, and I remember I was writing a letter at home to my girlfriend, and I had just gotten, we had been there maybe a half hour, and I'm going to write her a letter, and I'm writing her a letter, and they said, "C Squad, down the hill." We dropped everything, grabbed our helmets, and we were going down the hill. I don't remember where or why we were going. I knew we were going, but I was thinking about the letter that I was writing. And all of a sudden, something exploded. And I remember I was the only one left standing, and yet I was the only one, I was the most severely wounded. Everyone else was knocked down. And whatever blew up looked right in front of me. And I don't remember hearing it explode. I just remember seeing a cloud of dirt, and my ears clogged up. They started ringing. And I thought for a while, and I realized that I had been wounded. I started to run, and I realized my leg was broken in 3 places, so I fell down. And the medic came over, and I remember him opening my shirt, and my intestines were protruding, but they had told us that in basic training, that, you know, they prepare you for those mental things, that if this happens, don't worry, just hold them in. And I thought, wow, they told me, I'm going, wow, who would do that? But actually it was good advice, because it kept me calm. When I saw them, I didn't panic. I said, just hold them in. And the medic said, just hold them in, they'll be okay. And all that helped to calm me down. And I just held them in. And where we were was the bad spots, because they couldn't get to us for a while. And I remember laying there, and I really thought I was going to not make it out of Vietnam. And I had a surreal experience. It was as if mentally I was prepared just to die there in Vietnam. And everything seemed to be going in slow motion. Everyone was running around in slow motion. And I remember in boot camp they had taught us that if you lay around for 15 minutes, you're probably going to make it. And as soon as I thought that, everything came back to full circle. And I remember the medic, even today. I wish I could find him. He was as afraid as I was, because he couldn't find a vein. And he eventually did, which saved me. And I remember him trembling. He was trembling more than I was. And he did find a vein and did everything right, and he got me out of there. And I still think about him now. I don't know his name. I remember his face, and I wish I could find him. In fact, this year we're going to dedicate our memorial service to combat medics. And I've been on a trek trying to find this person. But when you leave Vietnam,
quietly you've all turned gray. You did your job, you saved our way. Our life and freedom you preserved. We've thanked you less than you deserve. You never boasted, bragged or asked for adulation for your past. You did the job you knew was right, and quietly you cry at night for bodies maimed and comrades lost, for sights beyond our furthest thoughts, for what you lived and felt and seen, for what the cost of freedom means. You leave us blessed with every breath that cost you arms and legs and death. You won the worst and greatest war. We owe you more, we owe you more. Thank you for your wondrous feats, for hope and speech and quiet streets, for worship as we choose to pray, for preservation of our way. Before you go, we need to show that in your silence we still know what you accomplished and what you did, for who we are and how we live. So go with love from wives and sons and daughters for a job well done, from kids who've never seen a tank. We give you thanks, we give you thanks. Thank you for your wondrous feats, for hope and speech and quiet streets, for worship as we choose to pray, for preservation of our way, for homes and jobs and baseball games, for many colors, many names. You saved our lives and we're still free, from shining sea to